we're going to introduce who our guests are. And so we are going to start over here on this side. We have Russell Richens, and Russell Richens is the producer of the show. And we'll clap at the end. Does that sound?
That sounds good.
Okay. Then we have Caleb Spivak, and he played Oliver Cowdery. We have Lincoln Hope, and he played Martin Harris. We have Dan Peterson, and he is the executive producer. Then we have Paul Wethrich, and he played Joseph Smith. We have Camry Fox, Emma Smith, and then we have Mark Goodman, who's the director of the film. So give an applause to everybody who had something to do with this film. They did an outstanding job, really wonderful job. And we'd like to also thank the Interpreter Foundation. That is how this movie came to be, and that is through Dan and Steve, who's prayed for us. He's also part of that organization, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later as we go on, but we wanted to highlight that, so thank you to both of you. Okay, you guys ready to do this?
Yes.
Do it.
Let's get into some questions, and we're going to have some fun. Okay, so we are going to start with the obvious role in the show, me. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to start with Joseph Smith. So, Paul, hi.
Hello.
Okay, when I was watching this, I wanted to know, how did you get into the space to play Joseph Smith? What did that feel like when you were offered the role by Mark?
Yeah, the way this came about was a big blessing for me. I had spent years studying the prophet Joseph Smith, and during that time, I developed this image of who I thought he was. And I did this thing where I studied Christ and Joseph Smith from a personality perspective, and I really wanted to know what they would have been like. And so, I spent all of this time studying him, and I felt like I had this person that I could almost be a good friend with and a good understanding. And then I got the script for the audition, and I remember reading the audition scenes and thinking, this is the Joseph Smith that I feel like I've known and always wanted to see, but never really gotten the chance to see. And so it was a blessing for me, because as I got the full script and I read through it just matched so well to that person that I had already felt like I knew, that it just worked out that way.
Wow, I like that you said that. And I am interested that you studied specifically the characteristics and the traits of these people. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah,
to know that about them.
It's very eye-opening when because you always see him as almost a Christ-like figure, right? He's portrayed, and you always see him in a prophetic role. But there's a very human aspect behind him that I wanted to really understand. And so when you study somebody with that perspective, you learn a lot.
Is there a human aspect of Joseph that surprised you the most?
I think what surprised me the most was, one thing I did when I prepared for the role was I would go through the scenes and I would look at the event that was happening, and then I would look at the year and I would write down his age. So every scene I knew exactly how old he was.
Oh, wow.
And the more I wrote down 23, 26, 24, 27, I realized how young he was and the burden he had at such a young age. Because we often see him portrayed as a 40-year-old, 35, 40-year-old man, and we envision him at the end of his life. But so much of church history happened while he was so young. I mean, everything that happened in Kirtland, he was 27 years old. And I was 27 years old when we filmed it. And so I just remember thinking, I cannot imagine having the burden of the church, a family, a wife, all of the prophetic calling, people apostatizing, all of this coming down on me as a 27-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And he had that burden from such a young age and carried it his entire life.
Right. Well, speaking of human aspects, one of the video clips that I wanted to show was at the very beginning when you are running with the plates. I don't think it gets any more human than that for me, because I wouldn't run for my own life, first of all. But to see you run, it's so real, and I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. And Mark, get your perspective on why you wrote this in and what it was like filming it. So let's see this clip. Okay, tell us about that scene. And were you really winded?
Oh yeah.
Were the plates heavy? I mean, tell me about all that.
What's interesting about this, so you see that set of plates. Now we got those plates from a guy, Russ, by the name of Dave Baird.
Dave Baird.
And he had recreated these plates, and they're very realistic. And those things weighed...
They're 45 pounds. I've weighed them myself.
Oh, right. They really are. Because I wondered if it was just like a prop.
Well, so our art department, thinking ahead of this, knowing that Paul is going to have to... Because you see all those different cuts in the movie. You know, you see the close-ups and different angles. And every time that happens, that means Paul had to take the plates, go up to the top of the mountain, and run down. Every time he ran down, he had to go back up. So thinking ahead, they created a piece of foam the same size and put that in some, linen. And Paul, here you go. This is going to make this much easier. At which point Paul said,
"Can I have the other ones?"
Really?
Paul knew that it wasn't going to be very realistic if he's carrying foam, and chose the heavy set of plates. And my guess is the next morning you wish you'd taken the foam ones.
I was sore. And I tried to, Joseph is very physical. There's lots of accounts about his physicality. And I tried to put on a few pounds before the role. And so I thought, I'm in good shape. But yeah, by the end of the day, my arm was cramped in this position from holding them under my arm for so long.
Well, and you think about that, when you're carrying something heavy and you get tired in this arm, you put it in the other arm.
Right.
When you get tired, you put it back. Well, because we're filming this, every time you see him, it has to be in the same arm. And so, yeah, he told me the next day he could barely lift that arm. So.
I bet. Well, I'd love to know from both of you, and any of you, if you have a thought on this, what does this tell us about sort of like the humanity of Joseph? Did it teach you anything about him and his character, this specific scene?
Yeah, I think I love that it showed him hit the guy, and he did hit somebody in the face with the plates. He knocked the guy out with the plates. And I think that showing that physicality, he was a strong guy. From a very young age, he was very physical, very strong. He grew up working, moving boulders, right, farming the land. And so for me, it was important to show that, yes, he could stand up in front of a group of people and give a discourse, but he was also very physical, and he was very physically capable of doing a lot of things even as a young kid. And so I like that they wrote that scene. I've never seen a portrayal where he actually fights the guys off, but it happened. And so I like that all that was portrayed in an honest way. And yeah, the clip itself is a couple minutes long, but I think we filmed that for 2 to 3 hours.
I think it was closer to 4 hours.
4 hours.
Yeah.
The very first take, we're going to add a little sweat here. And it's like, after that, I was like, okay, he's sweating plenty, And so it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, wow, he did go through this.
It's interesting that scene does a couple of things. Number one, of course, it introduces Joseph. But the other thing it does is it introduces the plates as a character for our audience, which I think is very important in this film, all about the witnesses witnessing the gold plates. And so what that does is portray those plates as an actual object for our audience at the very beginning, so that they know that this isn't just a story. Now, they can choose to believe that story or not, but for the film, it is portrayed as an actual object.
You did a great job of that, by the way. That was awesome how you did that. Any other thoughts about that?
I'd love to jump in. Playing Martin Harris, almost all of my scenes were with Joseph Smith, and it was so fascinating to be able to step into these shoes and literally feel and have these experiences of having all these scenes with Joseph Smith. And just the amount of growth and learning that I felt like I had a relationship with this historical character in a way that I never could have just by reading, but by actually interacting and talking and even between takes. But Paul is just such a wonderful and funny and charismatic and interesting and human person. And he brought all that to Joseph Smith, and that really helped me to see Joseph Smith's humanity. It's really easy to look back a few hundred years and see someone as a certain way, but these were all real people. Mm-hmm. They were just like us. They were called to do some things different than us. They were called to do some things that are the same that we're called to do. And I just can't say enough about how wonderful it was working with Paul as Joseph Smith.
Just to
Great
echo that a
words.
little bit,
Yeah, Caleb.
as someone who was learning this story as we were filming this project, I would agree that no one was better equipped to play Joseph Smith than Paul. And when our first filming location was in Upper Canada Village, and I spent a lot of time actually with Paul. We went on some nature walks and had some conversations where I was really pushing the envelope, and I think making Paul really think about the answers that he was going to give me, really pushing his faith so that I could better understand this story. And he is so well studied and is so faithful that you could not get a more authentic performance.
Wow. Well, and I like that you just brought that up. For those of you who don't know this, Caleb is not a member of the church. And so he was learning this as he went along. And I'm just curious, watching Paul and watching everyone do this, like, what's one thing you learned about Joseph that you didn't know?
I think the biggest thing is just maybe not just Joseph, but the witnesses as well, the level of faith.
Yeah.
And the level of faith of those individuals that were surrounded by Joseph and the witnesses is really powerful.
Oh, Caleb, I love that you just said that. I love that you just said the faith of the witnesses, because I'm looking at these three men who played such an important role in the bringing about this movie. And my question to you three is then, why? Why this perspective? Why take an antagonistic approach? Like, David Whitmer never came back to the church. Tell us the history behind the why of this movie.
Well, I thought that the story needed to be retold because I found even with members of the church, they didn't know it. In many cases, we know this for a fact, that some of them you'd ask them, well, who were the witnesses? They didn't know. It was something vaguely they learned years ago, but they couldn't really remember. They certainly didn't know the stories. They didn't think of them as human beings. They knew that they were faithful, and then they left the church, and who knows exactly why. I thought we needed to tell that story, and we needed to tell it honestly. I think one of the honest things is I wanted to say something about the running with the plates. Part of this film, I have to admit, the Interpretive Foundation has a kind of apologetic function. So showing that running with the plates solves a problem for us. Some critics said it's impossible, he couldn't have run with that much weight. Well, he did, and we know he did because we've got it on film,
And his arm really hurt too.
Yeah. So, part of this is answering questions, but people wanted to know, for example, why would the witnesses leave the church? Well, we tried to show why, and it was a human thing. I mean, if you were in that position, how would you have responded to these stresses and strains, these pressures that were being placed on you? And so that was the impetus to tell the story and to remind people of the story. I've said before in LDS contexts that the witnesses are the one bit of evidence that the Lord Himself gave us. He didn't give us chiasmus or Middle Eastern parallels or things like that. He's really concerned about the witnesses. They're foretold in the Scriptures, they're recorded in the Scriptures, and we've neglected them, I think. So I wanted to sort of force the issue, end the neglect.
I like that. What about you, Russell?
For me, how did it come about? It started with an interview for 2 days of Richard Anderson. Dan and many other people have known Richard, and we interviewed him. It was fascinating material, and he has studied the witnesses to the real depth. And so we were sitting around, and Mark was saying, how do we tell this story? And we simply, it hit me that the most interesting chapter in that book, investigating the Book of Mormon Witnesses, for me was the case against the witnesses, the arguments against it. And every one of those is answered in the book, but how many people have read the book? Don't know. Probably not that many. Although it's a really well-written book, not big, it's really well-written. And so it was, how do we tell this story? And I shared that with Mark, and we said, we need to do a film. We thought it was going to be a different kind of film. Now we're dealing with 3 major parts of this project, and this is only one of them. But that's how it came about, is from those interviews.
Wow, that's so fantastic. And then it came into your hands, Mark.
As a storyteller, is there a better era of church history than this, where there's so much drama, so much conflict, and as they go through the trials, there's such incredible growth which is what I love about this story, is to see the growth in Joseph. We decided from the very beginning that we wanted to portray Joseph as an emerging prophet, as a very young man who was learning as he went. And so many of the scenes are portrayed in that manner, as seeing Joseph as a young man, and rather than that prophet of Nauvoo, because we've told that story over and over and over again. Right. But we rarely see Joseph as that emerging prophet and as that young man. And so for me, that was something I very much wanted to do.
You did a great job. And I like the words that you used as you just described that. There was so much drama, but with that came so much growth. And I'm just curious to know, from those of you thinking back to the scenes in the movie, is there a specific scene that captured your heart with that drama and that growth? Anything that stands out to you in particular?
I was just going to say, I'm not familiar with the book that Russ was referencing, but one thing that really captivated me when I was reading the script is I was thinking that, wow, this is really bringing the criticisms and skepticisms to the forefront. And, I was almost reading it thinking, am I reading this right? Because it's almost making the case against it, like you were saying, in a lot of ways. And then I realized, wow, actually, this is a really powerful way to tell this story, because not only are you humanizing these folks, but you are opening your audience in a way by presenting it in the manner that they did, by addressing some of these difficult topics. Yeah. So I wouldn't say for me that there was a particular moment or scene, but just the entirety of the screenplay was very captivating and done in a way that achieves that goal.
One of the things that we really insisted on from the start was that this be an honest portrayal, not whitewashed, not just all the good parts and everything else kind of swept under the rug. It had to be honest. We have to explain why these good men, these witnesses, these faithful men separated themselves from the church. What were the things that were going on in their lives that caused trouble for them? And so we had to address things like the Kirtland Bank failure and the beginnings of plural marriage. We had to. If we hadn't, my feeling was the movie would lose all credibility. Yeah. It had to be an honest view. You can't exhaustively discuss all those subjects in a film, but you can't pretend they didn't happen.
We got ourselves into a little bit of trouble as we set the script out to historians for review. And some of the questions came back as, why are you portraying this? Why are you choosing to portray some of these negative things? And I would look at that and think, because we're telling the truth, that's negative? I'm not sure that's the case. Why do we continue to think that Joseph was a perfect man? Joseph never said he was perfect. Through so much of this, as Paul pointed out, Joseph was an extremely young man. He was 22 when he got the gold plates. He was 25 when the church was formed. And I don't know about you, but at 25 I made a few mistakes, and so did Joseph. And why do we think just because he made some mistakes that says that he wasn't a prophet? Absolutely. You can be human and still be a prophet, just like every prophet who ever walked the earth.
There's a line from Joseph early on that Lucy Mack Smith records, and it just strikes me as so really human. It's not in the film, but he comes in, he's had the first vision, his mother senses there's something different, Are you okay? And he says, yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. And then he says, I've learned for myself that Presbyterianism isn't true. Well, that's the church she belongs to. And I think, that sounds like a teenage kid.
Right? Yeah.
That sounds so human to me that, I can believe it. But again, it's the teenager Joseph Smith.
Definitely.
That is one of the things, like you mentioned, we see so much of the growth of all of these characters, including Emma. Most of my scenes deal with a lot of questions that Joseph and Emma may have had that we don't necessarily have record of. But for me, that stuck out a lot because we all have questions. We all go through those periods of, questioning and doubts. And at least for me, the times when I've been able to turn to the Lord, those have become the times of the most growth. And so I loved seeing that in the film as that example that, Joseph just didn't have all the answers. Even the witnesses who saw the gold plates didn't have all the answers. They still had questions, they still had doubts, and were able to see through the film, whether they left the church and came back or whether they left the church and never came back, they still have that faith and they still hold on to that.
Wow, thank you for bringing that up.
I'm sorry, and you touched on that, the growth. How many of us, When life's easy, we're kind of coasting. It's not until life really gets difficult and we go through hard things, that's where that personal growth comes from. Why would we expect that to be any different for Joseph? Joseph grew as a prophet through those trials, through the tribulations that he went through. That's what made him a prophet of God. That's what made Joseph Joseph, is going through those hard times that we chose to portray.
Well, Mark, I just have to say, I really appreciated, first of all, what you just said, that Joseph made mistakes, and of course he did. He was young, and that helped him to grow. And right at the beginning of the movie is one of the biggest mistakes that we often like to tell, that story of the lost 116 pages. And that was the scene that got me. And I knew it was coming. And as, you know, as a seminary institute teacher, having studied this and taught it so many times, I remember praying, like, please get this right. Please, like, do it right. Don't let it be hokey. And then in comes Lincoln. And it's so good.
Show the clip.
Let's watch the
Run the clip. And then we're going to talk about how you got to the point to be able to play that, because it's so good.
Martin, why do you not eat? Are you ill? Oh. I have lost my soul. I have lost my soul. Martin, have you lost the translation? Yes. It is gone, and I know not where. You made an oath to me, and I made an oath to God. And now you have condemned us both. I'm so sorry. You must find those pages. I cannot. Go and look again. I am sorry, Joseph. I have looked every place in my house. I have ripped open beds and pillows. It is gone. It is gone. God entrusted me, and I entrusted you, and the work we have done is in vain. What will become of his work, Martin? What will become of God's work? Dear God, what have I done?
Okay, start talking, all three of you, because how many takes did it take? I'm just curious.
So Lincoln, you better tell us the story here.
Yeah, start talking.
This is possibly one of the most known stories of Martin Harris, one of the most recorded by the church. There's several church videos that portray this. If you ask someone, what did Martin Harris do? They'll probably say, he lost 116 pages. Like, that's what everybody knows. So, I mean, I knew that, let's be honest. Maybe this was Martin Harris's worst day of his life. And we had to bring that to life. And that's not always an easy thing to do. I did a lot of research, first off. I read Susan Easton Black's and Larry Seaporter, is it Larry Seaporter's? Very large and very comprehensive book called Martin Harris, Uncompromising Witness of the Book of Mormon. And it was fascinating. It was fascinating to read. So I got a lot of facts. I called Susan Easton Black, and she talked to me, and I said, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? She was wonderful. She was just so kind and generous to take some time. And then I just, I had information, and then I had to really dive in deep to see how these things would make me feel, because my instrument is myself. And so I had to be able to experience that as we went. And so I think I had a few days off, and basically just reflected and pondered and prayed and really got myself to this very deep emotional place, which I felt really mirrored what Martin Harris had gone through, this experience of having done the worst thing that he could possibly ever have done in anyone's entire life, and he did it. And I showed up on set that morning, and I was ready to go. I could have cried at the drop of a hat. I could have sobbed and pounded the table, and everything's set up and ready to go. And as you notice, we're all sitting around the table, and I thought maybe they would start the camera on me. But they didn't. They started over here on Hiram, and they filmed him for about 30 minutes. So basically, we start going all around the table.
And there's a reason we do that, just so you know, that for efficiency's sake, and you know, a day of filming costs how much, Russ? Thousands of dollars, right?
It's a lot.
And so you have to be as efficient as possible. And so every time you move the camera, you have to relight. It's a relight, and it's a complete new setup. And so that's what you're doing. And so you start here, and then you go to the next person, because you can't do this, and then this, and then this, and then this, because that would take you days. So for efficiency's sake, we work our way around the table. Now, having worked with these two previously, I, as a director, I try and determine, okay, I know I'm going to need a little bit of emotion here. And I know that pretty much when I can get that from Paul. Lincoln's new for me here. We had done a scene previously where we had started with Paul, we'd come to Lincoln second, and Lincoln had used the energy and the emotion that he'd gotten from Paul, and then when he got to Lincoln, he was ready. So I'm thinking, okay, that's what we're going to do. We're going to start here. Go ahead.
So anyway, we're going around the table, and I'm doing this scene every time, and every time we do it, I mean, we're talking like, by the time we're halfway around the table, we've done it 30 times. Wow. We've done the scene 30 times. And I'm starting to feel this emotional gas tank is getting pretty close to empty. And it's getting later in the day, and I'm like, oh man, what am I gonna do? I'm kind of, there was kind of a strengthening kind of in the middle. After about an hour, it's like, this is pretty strong. And then it just started to feel off. And as we went around to one of the actors, as it was coming closer to me, I was like, between takes, as they were resetting the lights, I was like, is it okay if I just say the lines kind of, with some emotion, but not all the emotion? And the person was like, no, I'd rather you give me everything you got. So I was like, okay. So as we kept going around the table, I was really trying to give every actor the full performance. Well, unfortunately, 6 hours later or so, by the time it got to me, I felt completely empty. Just emotionally done, tired, ready to go home. Just not in that place where you need to be as an actor. An actor, you want to be relaxed. You want to be emotionally nimble and agile and ready to go. Because every time Paul says a line, I need to react to that differently. I can't say it the same way every time. It's not full of life that way. I have to be listening and reacting, and it can be very, very demanding. So it was my turn, and I just had nothing. And I'm thinking there, what am I going to do? I have no idea what to do with myself at this point. And you mentioned something that I had forgotten.
Yeah, and so we got to that point, and I'm just thinking, okay, here we go, Lincoln, can't wait. And Lincoln said, can I have a moment? And he went outside, and that's not an uncommon thing for actors to want to do when they're going to have to do that kind of a thing. And so that's great. And so Lincoln leaves, and he doesn't come back. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe we're done. And I don't know where you went and what you did in that space, but when he got back, that's what we got, which was stunning. And watching it again, I have watched this film. I did the editing as well. I have watched this thing hundreds of times. I have seen that film hundreds of times. And I got emotional again watching that.
Yeah.
So what did you do?
What did you do?
Well, first off, I got in my car and I drove away. No. I just went outside the door because we were filming at the This Is the Place monument.
Right.
In the yellow house, is that the one that was? I just went outside the door, and you know, there's a light stand and there's a reflector, and the grass was kind of blowing in the wind, and I just thought, what am I going to do? And you know, I said a prayer, and I just realized that the way I was feeling at that time, literally as a person, as an actor, was very close to what Martin Harris must have been feeling, that he was lost and had nowhere to go and nothing to do. And yet, he had to go in there and face the music and admit what had happened. And so, I think I laughed a little bit like, oh, this is so cosmically ridiculous. You know, like this couldn't be more perfect. The way I was feeling, you know, I was feeling, I'm quitting acting, I'm never doing this again. Terrible, you know, all those things were going through my head. And then just to feel that maybe for the first time that I understood that man in a way I never had before. What he must have gone through at that moment. And look, he didn't run away, right?
Right.
He went in, he sat down for a very awkward dinner, and he answered the question, and he answered it truthfully. And that's what happened. So it was kind of one of those moments where you know, the actor and the character merged. So I would never want to do it again. I would be really interested to see what would have happened if we had shot me first. It would have been different. This may be much better than it could have been another way, but what a gift that we were given. It was so painful, but.
Well, but part of that is the honesty in your performance. And I mean, there's one thing to have emotion, but when you have the honesty behind the emotion, that's when we feel the truth of it.
And your performance was beautiful, but the thing that really captures me is how uncomfortable it makes you feel as an audience member, because we can feel your anguish.
Yeah.
And I totally sympathize with you. I think I've even asked Mark before, anytime I had to be emotional, I said, grab my coverage first. You know,
and I'll often do that, is ask the actor what they
I'm like, grab my coverage first, because...
Sorry, Lincoln, I forgot about you.
But to be where you are, and it's like, yeah, sometimes it's just not there. And what shows about, you know, in your performance and how raw it was, one, it was so important to you to do Martin justice. I mean, you put so much effort into this role, and so you had that piece of it as well. But oftentimes we go in as actors we have an idea of how we want to feel in the moment, and then when you let all that go, and you came back and you just were there and you were Martin, that's exactly what we got.
Absolutely. Well, and kudos to you for making him do it that many times, because in this very moment, I think every one of us just learned something about Martin Harris we didn't know. I'd never considered. He probably had literally cried every last tear he could have cried leading up to that moment with Joseph.
Can you imagine?
I know, like, it was so divine the way you did that, because I never considered that. He had to have been... And just had been like you said, you had nothing left to give, and I bet that is where Martin came in that room that day. I have nothing left to give. I don't know where else to look. I've cried all that I could cry. And so what a divine moment in this film. And you have, as we've talked back in the green room, it's been interesting because you have both said the miracles that went into the roles and the filming of this. There were so many, and I think we just witnessed one of them right here. So that was amazing. So thank you for sharing that and for being so personal and willing to share that.
Thanks for sharing my discomfort and anguish.
That's why we're here. Well, speaking of the more discomfort and anguish, because there's a lot of it in this movie, and how could we not talk about the role with Emma and Joseph? And after the plates are lost, that you then give birth to this baby that dies. Tell us about that role and what it was like to play Emma in that moment in history.
Yeah, so...
And your own physical condition at the time.
Yes, so
That's cool.
Shortly before filming this film, I found out that I was pregnant with my first son. We hadn't told anybody yet. We ended up telling some people partway through filming, but I think that was another little miracle that brought me. I've always related to Emma. I don't know why, but I've always felt a kinship to her. I've always wanted to play her. So when this script came my way, I was praying that I would get cast. But I think that was another little blessing that I had now, this mindset that I was pregnant, was ready to give birth to a baby soon, and it helped me get into the mindset of how tragic that was for her and for Joseph. And in the film, after their first son passes away, she has all these questions for Joseph, and Joseph has these questions and doubts, and that was so eye-opening to me. And we don't have a lot of information about Emma. We don't have primary sources on her, unfortunately. I would love to read journals of hers, but that felt so true to me, that in these moments of anguish that she had those questions. I think we think of Emma and Joseph as unflinching in their faith, and of course her saying what, she always supported Joseph as a prophet, which she did, but I love in the film she says, did you not see God? Did you not speak to him? Which I think is only human. I think that's, had I been in that situation, how could you not have those doubts? These horrible things are happening. How can you be a prophet if this is occurring? And I just had the thought, as we were talking about the 116 pages, we don't feature Emma as much in this film because it's about the three witnesses, but how much she lost in the course of the restoration of the church. The 116 pages were a big loss for her too, because that was the part of the scriptures that she had helped scribe for, correct?
Yeah.
She lost several children, not just
She'll
from...
bury 6 of her 11 children.
Yes, breaks my heart. Yeah. And not just because of medical conditions, but as direct results of people persecuting Joseph. And just that she was able to still be a support to him and welcome people into her home continually, and be the leader that she was in the church is incredible to me, and is such a testament to her faith and her witness of what was happening, of the importance of bringing forth the gospel and finishing the translation and everything that went along with that.
I appreciate your words with that. Any other thoughts with you, Paul? In thinking about, going back to your idea of the humanity of Joseph and what that must have been like to bury your son and then leave Emma 3 days later.
Yeah, that scene was emotionally difficult, but also difficult in the sense that how far do you take that as an actor in representing somebody like Joseph Smith? And I loved, when I read it in the script, I thought it was written so well, because really the questions that Emma poses it's multiple questions laid in there, right? She says, didn't you see God? Didn't he speak to you? And really what she's saying is, aren't we to expect something different from somebody who's spoken to God, right? What kind of life, if these are God's chosen people and his chosen witnesses and specially designed elect, what kind of life can we expect? Couldn't we expect a little more than this?
Like, it should be
You know,
easier.
shouldn't it be
How many times
easier?
have we thought that as
Exactly,
people?
and well, didn't Peter raise the dead? And you know, shouldn't we expect you to be able to? And so there's multiple levels when you're playing this. You know, as Joseph, it's, you know, he had these questions, and so he begins to doubt. You know, I kind of looked at it that there was multiple characters in this film. There was Joseph, there was Martin, who he had lost, and that weighed heavy on his mind. There was Emma, there was his now dead son, and there was God, and it's Joseph versus all of those people all at once. And one by one, he lost all of them. And that scene is where he lost Emma for a moment. And that's hurtful, to have your partner doubt you and question you. And I remember before we shot that scene, feeling all of this, and I thought, you know, I don't want to be dishonest to what he was feeling, but I also don't want to take it too far and reflect him poorly. And so while we were shooting the scene, normally we'll shoot and it's a master scene, so they're very far back. And so we're performing the scene, and Emma goes to go away, and I kind of sink back down, and I just was so angry at her and at myself and at God and at Martin, and there was nothing I could do but just start pounding the ground with my shovel and lose my temper. And they called cut, and I remember thinking, oh, I hope I just didn't take that too far. And to Mark's credit, he said that was great. And in fact, he said, bring your face up a little more so we can, because I kind of buried my face down, and he said, we want to see that. We want to see that side of him. And I remember feeling very grateful for, you know, the producers and directors and a chance to portray him in that way, because, you know, he was a temperamental person, and I believe that he would have lost his temper.
Was there ever a time when you didn't just want to see Joseph's face or Oliver's face, or, you know, if I had a face like that? So I'm sorry. There's some comfort for me, as you know, as we listen to Paul, as we think about the reality of what we can expect as a people, and that, yeah, if it happened to Joseph, then perhaps it's okay that life isn't perfect for me. Perhaps that means that God still loves me. And we, you know, there's a lesson to be learned there.
That's the lesson in that moment. That's what I learned. And I'm so grateful that you wrote that part into this movie, because it was so raw and real, and many of us could relate to that in a very sad and grievous way. So thank you for doing that. And I liked how you pointed out that Joseph had lost so much. Friends, and that for this moment he lost his wife, and what that must have felt like. I just learned that, so I'm grateful that you put that twist on it. Wow.
I think there's a powerful moment in the scene, you added this in later, between Joseph and Emma as well, that we then see Emma, so, you know, in the scene after they've lost their son, she says, you know, basically, are you a prophet? And if you are a prophet, why is this happening? And then in a scene later in the film, we see after the Kirtland bank failure, she says, I believe that you are a prophet. Mm-hmm. And I just, you know, being in Joseph's shoes, having the support of those close to him, not only his wife, but when he was finally able to share the gold plates with his close friends, you know, and having these people that know the best parts of him and the worst parts of him. You know, Emma, more than anyone, I'm sure, saw when he lost his temper and saw when he had those doubts and made those mistakes, and they didn't always agree on things, and she still believed that he was a prophet. And that's such a testament to me. You know, if the people who were there with him at the time, seeing his faults firsthand, could also see that he was receiving that revelation, then we can gain that testimony as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Okay. Whew. We're going to take a break. That was a lot. So what we're going to do is we're going to invite the Truman Brothers to come up here. We have Chad and Ben, and they are going to perform 2 songs for us, and then we're going to dive back into more of this. Hi, guys.
We're just here to sing some songs, mix it up a little bit. We are Ben and Chad Truman brothers from Nashville, Tennessee. Live here just down the road in Vineyard right now, though. So we are now local and happy to be here. We'll do some restoration hymns for you. Hark all ye nations, hear heaven's voice, through every land that all may rejoice. Angels of glory shout the refrain, truth is restored again. Oh, how glorious from the throne above shines the gospel, drive truth and love, bright as the sun. This heavenly ray lights every land today. Searching in darkness, nations have wept, waiting for dawn, their vigil they've kept. All now rejoice, the long night is old, truth is on earth once more. Oh, how glorious from above shines the gospel of truth and love, bright as the sun. This heavenly ray lights every land today. Come on now. I need you guys here. Chosen by God to serve Him below, to every land and people will go, standing for truth with fervent accord, teaching His holy word. Oh, how glorious, throne above, shines the gospel, light of truth and love, bright as the sun. This heavenly ray lights every land today. One more time, right? Oh, how glorious, the throne above shines the gospel, truth and love, bright as the sun. This heavenly ray lights every land today. Oh, lights every land today. Oh, lights every land today. Thank you. So, a little bit of Nashville came out in that little rendition. We're actually, we do a little bit of that, a little bit of country, but we're members of the Nashville Tribute Band, if you guys know that group at all. And then we also do stuff together, a little bit more pop rock, but we just love it all. We love good songs and good messages. So we thought we'd take this next hymn and do our own little spin on it. This is Day Dawn is Breaking. The day dawn is breaking, the world is awaking, the clouds of night's darkness are fleeing away. The worldwide commotion, from ocean to ocean, now heralds the time of the beautiful day. Beautiful day of peace and rest. Bright be thy dawn from east to west. Hail to thine earliest welcome rain. Beautiful, bright, millennial day. In many a temple, the saints will assemble and labor as saviors of dear ones away. Then happy reunion and sweetest communion we'll have with our friends in the beautiful day. Beautiful day of peace and rest. Bright be thy dawn from east to west. Hail to thine earliest welcome ray. Beautiful bright millennial day. Beautiful day of peace and rest. Bright be thy dawn from east to west. Hail to thine earliest welcome ray. Beautiful bright millennial day. Beautiful bright millennial day.
Wow, thank you. Wow. Thank you so much, Ben and Chad. That was awesome. We're going to have you guys come back at the end. So good, so good. All right, Caleb, you're up. We're just going right for the gullet here. Okay, Caleb, you played Oliver Cowdery, and we found out earlier that you were not a member of the church. So I just want to know, why did you take this role, and what did you find out going into it, and just everything about learning about him? Just talk to me about this.
Well, I think my answer today would be different than my answer at the start of the project.
Tell me both then.
Well, as an actor, you're getting auditions all the time. They're coming through. And originally, I auditioned for the role of Edwin Kelly, who's the news reporter who's kind of seen throughout the film, questioning David Whitmer about his account as a witness. And when I put in that audition initially, I didn't research the project or the story, and so I thought that this just took place in modern day. So I went and I filmed the audition. I'm this reporter, and I'm, doing this. Great. You send it off. You file away your emails.
Like
you
on
cook
Law and
dinner.
Order, just
whatever.
some reporter on a show.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So then I got a message from my manager that this project came up again, Witnesses, and they want to have me read for Oliver Cowdery. And my manager said, you should look a little closer to this project. They clearly are interested in you, otherwise they wouldn't be calling you back. So I said, all right, well, let me research who this Oliver Cowdery is. So I pull it up and I'm like, okay, I can kind of see the resemblance. He's much more handsome, and so then I realized what the story was, and you don't have the entire script when you're auditioning. You have what's called a side, and that's just the portion that you're going to be auditioning with. So without an understanding of the story, you have zero context other than what you can find online. So did some research, but again, you get a lot of auditions, and so you're moving through the process pretty quickly. But I thought, yeah, all right, I'll put a little more attention here and dress up like Oliver and do my hair kind of like Oliver would have worn it. And the rest is history. But as I learned more about the project, as I alluded to earlier at the top of our event here, is that I was a little skeptical, one, because I had kind of a preconceived idea of LDS. And I think that it's easy to kind of judge others. And, I had this idea of what LDS was and what it meant. And so I said, well, I've got to be open-minded about this if I'm going to be a part of this project. And it reminded me that in general, I need to be more open-minded. And so I think that the biggest lesson that I kind of took away from participating in this project is to be open-minded, not be so quick to judge, and to, I think it's what I love about the fact that Mark and Russ and the rest of the team so bravely brought an outsider into this world is exactly what the mission of this is about. And whether or not I become a convert, I think there's, I can say that in this moment, I have been changed and touched. And I even found myself, I guess, in kind of a weird way, doing missionary work. We were doing these.
Get him a tag.
Yeah, we were doing screenings in Arizona, and I invited the Hertz person to come see the film, and they brought a whole bunch of people. So that's exactly what this is all about, is about spreading the message. And what better way to do it than by bringing in someone who you want to spread the message to.
Wow. Can we applaud that? That is so great, Caleb. Wow. Well, we have to see this clip with Caleb because, again, this is another one that, for me, was emotional. And then when I found out you weren't a member of the church, it just blew my mind because you have no context for how well you played this. So roll that clip. It is really good.
I would have a word with you.
Yes, of course.
Alone.
I'm sure there's nothing we have to talk about that Sydney can't hear.
I'm pretty sure that there is. Alone.
Sydney, would you please give us a few minutes?
Of course, Joseph. Of course.
What is troubling you?
This has gone too far. I speak of Fanny Alger, your housemaker, or is she your wife?
Oliver, I feel your outrage, I do. Please, sit down and we can talk this over. We were sealed by the power of God and under His authority.
So God did it.
As part of the restoration of all things, in the same manner as Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Is this the same God who will not allow me to sell my property?
You should know better than anyone that we buy property to serve the church, not ourselves.
It is the right of every citizen in this country to hold property.
We are the citizens of God.
Joseph, my brother Joseph, don't you see?
See what?
You are intoxicated by the power of leading a believing people. That power is a sacred trust, one that you must not, cannot betray, or as God is my witness, you will be smitten. Joseph, my dear Joseph, I have heard God's voice flow through you like living water. I have stood in the presence of angels with you, but I fear you have been deceived. And if you are smitten, what will become of us?
I'm not deceived, Oliver. I will always maintain a true principle, even if I stand alone in it.
This is a difficult scene for a lot of us. First of all, from your standpoint, where did this emotion come from?
Well, good acting comes from good writing. And I want you to say that line in any other way. You are intoxicated by the power of leading a believing people. The way that it's written, you can't say it any other way but in an angrily way. So that helps a lot.
Yeah.
I've been a part of lots of projects with really bad writing. And it doesn't matter how good the acting is.
It's just the perfect word for
It
that
won't be good.
moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the writing is very good. And then, this is, as someone who, again, has these preconceived notions, this is one of the things that you hear about. It's like, oh, those are the people with a lot of wives. And it's, well, if you don't do your research and have an understanding of the church, then that's going to be what you understand it to be.
Yeah.
And so it was a relief to get up to speed on the truth around that, but also the fact that it was being brought to the forefront. And as an actor, it's a powerful scene to perform because it is such a touchy topic.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's really hard to get there because of how significant the moment is.
There's a moment there that Caleb's performance brings out that I think is truly remarkable. So it's one thing for him to yell at Joseph, but it's after that moment when Joseph leaves and you see on his face that moment of, I've done what I can. Oliver, the remarkable thing about Oliver is a believer. He is all in. He always believes. He may disagree with Joseph, but he never doubts the veracity, the truth of the church, and the bringing forth of the Book of Mormon. He thinks that Joseph has gone astray. And it's interesting because I don't remember, there's a revelation in the Doctrine and Covenants where Oliver is told to admonish Joseph and to be admonished of him. Oliver sees that as his role, and he's taking that seriously. And he thinks that Joseph has gone astray, and that's what he's going to do, is admonish Joseph. And there's that moment that is so true in Caleb's performance where he's just, he's tried to do what he can do. And now he's left with this division with Joseph.
Well, I want to know from you three, this is a heavy scene, and it's an uncomfortable part of the show. For all of us, like, oh, the Fanny Alger, and the money, and it's a really hard time in church history. Why did you feel like you needed to include this in the movie? Because a lot of us would have been like, no, it's fine if we didn't hear about that. And even as you're saying, when you study it, you start to understand it a little more. And then I'm like, and even then we really don't. We're still uncomfortable. So why did you include that? Why was that important?
I think we had to for the sake of honesty. It's part of the story. We couldn't suppress it. I insist on that from the start, that we have to face these issues. If we pretend they didn't happen, then we lose any believability with the audience. Anyway, an informed audience that knows these things happen. We're factors in the story of Oliver Cowdery and the other witnesses. So we had to do it. We had to address it face on. And, also because I believe in telling true stories. And I don't want to hide any of that. It's part of the human drama, and it makes for a good film in a sense. If everything just proceeds placidly along and everyone is happy all the time, that's not true to human experience. And there you lose credibility just on the basic level that even believing audiences will say, that's not the way it was, or if that is the way it was, then why is my life such a mess? Why do I have doubts? Why do I have issues, and so on? This is to tell you that it was always like that. There's a passage in the Book of Mormon I like where the later Nephi and Lehi, just before the coming of Christ, are saying, wish we could have lived in the days of our fathers. Then were the people easy to be entreated. Well, if you know the story of the original Nephi and Lehi, you're thinking, what? It's always our tendency to romanticize the past and to assume that, it must have been really clear-cut and easy then. It isn't now, but if I just lived in that period, everything would have been easy for me. It's never been true, ever. So
I was just going to add something to that, and it's kind of an echo of it. We decided as a filmmaking team, Mark, James, Jordan, myself, working with the Petersons, right from the get-go, that we were going to be, as Dan has said, we were going to be honest. We're not going to sugarcoat it, but we are going to strive to remain faithful with it. But tell it the way it is. Not to shed a negative light on anything, but an honest light. And that's a difference between a negative light, in my mind, and an honest light.
Do you see a difference in that, a negative and an honest?
Why do we assume it's negative? It's the growth in every one of us that occurs as we go through hard things. And if any of us, if we were to do film on our lives, number one, they'd be pretty boring. But number two, the interesting things are, as Dan mentioned, is the drama, the conflict in life. That's what storytelling is all about, because that's where we see growth. That's where we see human characters become better.
Mm-hmm. Right. Absolutely. Yeah, Paul.
This scene was, so like Caleb said, you don't get the entire script when you audition. You get a side, maybe a scene, maybe two. And the two scenes that I got for the audition was the scene that we just watched with Caleb and the scene where Martin Harris lost 116 pages.
Oh, wow.
And I remember thinking, wow, these guys are going for it. And I went and I did the audition, and I went back to work, and I had a coworker that had a lot of issues with church history. And he had grown up his entire life and learned a lot of things later on, and he felt betrayed, and he felt like it had been hidden from him, and he'd become very disillusioned by it. And so I remember going back to work, and he said, what did you audition for? And I said, oh, it's actually a church history scene, and I auditioned for Joseph Smith. And he goes, oh yeah, are they going to talk about Fanny Alger? And I said, yeah, actually, that was the scene I auditioned with. And he kind of stopped and he said, well, are they going to talk about the tear stone? I said, I actually think they are. And he said, who's making this? You know? And he was pleasantly surprised. I mean, he has a lot of hard feelings towards the church and church, you know. And as things came out, as the trailer was released, he watched it, and I could tell it was very refreshing for him. And I think a lot of people that hear bits and pieces, but they don't get the context, you know, and they hear it out of context, and they feel like, oh, why wasn't I taught this in Sunday school, or where was this been? And you know, it's being hidden from me. And so I think this approach of saying, no, like, we don't have anything to hide, it's the truth, but you need to understand it in the context of the history and as these men were. And I think that it's just so powerful to tell it that way.
Well,
and
Paul,
needed.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I'm thinking, isn't that the purpose of the Interpreter Foundation? The underlying values are to just bring things to light and be okay with it.
And not to hide from any tough issues.
Right.
You address them. I think that is the biggest feeling that people have when they have problems. Is they feel they've been betrayed, misled. And so I think especially in the current information age, you simply can't do that. Yeah. And so the best way to deal with problems is to address them face on. And just tell the story the way it is. Quite often people will hear, you know, a negative story from someone who's very negative, and then they feel, well, I've been lied to, I've been deceived, I wasn't told this. I say, just tell the story. Right. So that when someone comes along and says, well, did you know that? Say, yeah, I did. Yeah. It doesn't affect me as much. They've been, if you will, this is an image that Richard Bushman, I know, likes to use. They've been inoculated. You know, and the old process of vaccination was to give a little taste of the disease, but in a controlled, healthy situation from someone who knew a lot and was your friend, and that would strengthen you against the onslaught of a real disease. I see it as sort of that. But if you try to hide it, if you try to protect a child so completely from all diseases and all bugs forever, the minute that child is exposed to the real world, it's going to be very, very sick.
It's a great application of that. I really like that. That was great. Well, okay, then we have to talk about another uncomfortable moment with you. And I think that, sorry to put you on the spot again, but I felt like in this scene, many of us can relate. And I want everybody to kind of think about if you've ever felt this way in the church. When Martin Harris is asked for more money, and he's already had this, you know, horrible, I don't know, we just have to play the scene because it's done so well. So let's play the scene where Martin is asked for more funding and kind of just talk about this, because I think a lot of us as members of the church can relate, like, you want more, you're asking more, and so that was done well in this scene. So we're going to watch this clip.
Hello, Joseph.
Martin, I need your help.
You need my money, you mean? That's all you've ever needed from me.
For which the Lord has blessed you.
Yes, He has blessed me.
Martin, you've been a good and faithful brother. But yes, The Lord needs your help one more time. These are hard times in Kirtland.
The bank.
The bank.
I warned you it was not wise. You cannot just print paper money that is not backed up by real assets, gold, silver.
And had those with the ability to do so joined in, we would not be having this discussion.
I was your first and faithful friend, Joseph. And Oliver, David, Sidney, they have taken my place. They have been given high and holy callings. And I have been stuck with the church's bills.
What were your thoughts? How did you feel and for you in your own life?
I love that scene. I think it's beautifully written, and one of the reasons that I love it and that I think it's beautifully written is these two men are each telling the truth to each other. They're telling their truthful emotions. Joseph is being very plain. Martin's being very plain. They're really talking about it. It's not easy for either of them at this point. And so just that truth coming through to me is very beautiful. I feel that Martin Harris, I think he doubted himself a lot. In addition to wanting to see the plates, he wanted to know that he was really part of something. And I think he knew that. I think he had a testimony very early on, even though he keeps asking to see the plates. But I felt like, for me, that was because he wanted proof that the Lord had picked him to help. And I think that comes out in this scene, because he's basically saying, this did not turn out the way I wanted it to. This is not what I thought this would be. But isn't that exactly what life is like? Isn't that exactly what we go through every day? We're trying to do good things. We're really trying to live what we believe. And somehow it never turns out quite the way we plan. And usually, maybe always, that's for our good. And it's so interesting to see Martin suffer through this. Yeah. And as Mark was saying earlier, these are all points of growth. These are points where these characters come together and they're honest, and then they can move forward from there, which again is just like life, right? If you're hiding something, if you're lying about something, if you're not talking about something, or pretending it didn't happen, it's really hard to move on from that. But when you're being honest with each other, and when these two men can get together and say, you hurt my feelings, and the other one says, well, sorry about that, but there's something bigger going on here. And he's like, yeah, you're right. They get to move forward from that point. And it's just, to me, that's one of the things about this film, is it shows Joseph Smith as well as the witnesses as real people. And I did not realize how much like me they were. Yeah. You know, each one of them, particularly Martin. I mean, I kind of like this guy now. I really like Martin Harris because I get to experience so much of what he experienced. But it's wonderful to be able to see them in that human light and realize that even though they lived over 200 years ago, they're just like us. Mm-hmm. And they suffered through so many things, and it's the times when they worked their way back that made them stronger. So I think that scene really, really shows us that.
I love your perspective on that. And when you said they're just like us, it made me think, like, how did you relate to this scene? How are you like Martin?
I just want to jump in, and I have to give credit to Lincoln, because when I read through the script, first of all, personally, I've always had callous feelings towards Martin, and the script did not help with that. And I just didn't like him, and he bugged me. And the very first scene that I shot was in Canada, and it was the scene where we're in the wood shop, and I'm digging up the floorboard, and Martin's saying, you know, you asked for my help, but I can't see them, and well, when can I see them? And you know, they're heavy, and I'm reading it, and I'm thinking, give it a rest, man, you know?
Yeah.
How many times are you gonna ask me? And I remember walking to set, I had my little script, you know, that they give you, and I'm just thinking, I do not know how I'm going to, I know that they were good friends, but I do not feel friendly towards this person. I just can't, you know? He lost 116 pages, just like he had said. And so I sit down, and Lincoln comes in, and he begins the line, and he says, you asked for my help, and yet you can't show them to me. And I immediately felt so much sympathy and love and empathy for him. And because in that one line, he was so humble and so real and so honest. And so there was just this love and this kinship. And going to this scene, I had knots in my stomach going into this scene. They had me ride up on a horse, and I just remember feeling sick to my stomach because Joseph was 27 years old. The church is $100,000 somewhat in debt. Apostasy is everywhere. And he has nowhere else to turn.
Right.
And he's going to approach a man that he was a dear friend of. He says it in the scene, I was your first. I was there before anybody else was there. And Joseph knows that. You know, Joseph knows that now he's with Oliver, and he's with David and Sydney, and there's a lot of things, but really, you know, for me, this movie was about Joseph and 3 friendships that went through some really rough times. And I loved going in, and I was sick to my stomach because I knew I was going to see this person that I had hurt, and he had hurt me, and I was asking him to do something bigger. And that happens in the church, you know. Feelings get hurt. Leaders say things and make decisions that you don't agree with locally or on a grander scale, and you know, a Sunday school teacher says something, or and offenses are taken, and it's difficult to go back and think, well, you know, it shouldn't be like this, and how much are they going to ask of me and expect me to keep showing up,
right,
and expect me to keep giving, and expect me to keep making sacrifices, and it's difficult.
Well, you just taught me a powerful lesson when you said, I didn't like him. And I was like, give it up. Like, how many times do we have to work with people we just don't like?
Exactly.
And you're just like, give it, I don't know, just, you know, let me just take charge. And you got to work together. And so, yeah, powerful, right? Everything that you just said. Mark, please.
It was interesting. This was one of the first scenes that these 2 guys did together. And I watched this develop as, you know, they did this scene, and there's a powerful connection between actors as they play off each other, and they can help each other through their emotion. Lincoln talked about this earlier, where he's doing this over and over and over again around the table, and every actor he acts with wants his best performance because they draw from that. And so I watched these 2 as they drew from each other during this scene, and there was a moment. There's a little moment afterwards. They walked outside the barn, and there was a little hug between the 2 of them, and Lincoln said thank you to Paul. And there was this moment there where they connected on a real level, which made a difference with their performances throughout the entire film.
Well, Mark, I want to know, you just told us what you felt that moment was for them, but as a director, what was that moment like for you? Why did it make you emotional?
I think there were several times in this film where the Spirit whispered to me that this is a moment of truth, that this actually happened, and that you've been given the privilege of witnessing a moment of truth. There was another moment that also involved Lincoln, and that was towards the end of the film. We see Martin Harris. You know, he goes through this entire film, and he doesn't receive his witness. And out of everyone, Martin seems to want this more than anybody. He just wants that witness. And again, over and over and over again, he expresses that. And so we were filming that scene where he finally does receive his witness. And this is in Sturbridge Village, and we're on this hillside. And as you see that, you see Lincoln there alone, and then Paul Joseph comes and joins him. And it's just the two of them in this idyllic setting. What you don't see is on the other side of the camera, there's an entire film crew over here. There's all these sound guys and lighting guys and the production people. And we've got, as the camera moves, you have this dolly, and I've got these grips bringing up the dolly the size of a small Volkswagen that they've got to get into place, and they've all this work that has to take place, and then we're blocking through the scene, and this is what's going to happen, and in the back of my mind, I know we've got to get this done, and we've got to get this done in a hurry, because we've got to go film 3 more baptisms this afternoon. And then as we go through this, and we begin to film, and in the middle of this, I have this moment where everything goes away, and the Spirit whispers to me again that this happens. And I knew it was one of those tender mercies and one of those moments when I knew that what we were doing was right and good and that it was going to work.
Wow. Beautiful, Mark. Thank you.
Follow that up.
Yeah, please.
I had another moment, and you may not have expected this, but it involved Paul and Emma. As he runs into the house on the interior of that scene, you remember that scene? And you run in the side. We've shown the scene where he's running down the hill, but then he shows up and he drops to the floor. There's a moment where he drops to the floor and the plates are picked up by a sister and put on the table. Mm-hmm. And Paul captured this so well. I looked over at him, and he's looking at his screen family, the Smith family, his brothers and sisters and his parents there. And he's got this moment of relief on his face that finally somebody else can at least have some interaction. I'm not just making this up. It's really happening. And I had a moment where literally I felt the Spirit start from the crown of my head, and it was like pouring water upside down. Just go from the top all the way to my toes. No exaggeration. And I had a very similar impression. And that was, you're getting it right. That this is really telling the story. And to see that look and that feeling of Joseph looking at his family who are supporting him and believing him, that was powerful stuff.
Wow. Russ, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Well, and just tonight, how many times we have felt that. I mean, my favorite scripture in Galatians in the New Testament, all the different ways you can feel the Spirit: love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith. I mean, we have felt joy tonight. How awesome that the Spirit has been here to witness that. So I appreciate you sharing that story. Mark, I have to go back to the story you shared because we have a video clip. So let's watch the clip of Martin Harris receiving his witness.
Dear God, Thou knowest my weaknesses, but even more, Thou knowest my heart. Grant me strength, grant me wisdom. Grant me Thy grace, and I will endeavor to do all in my power to further Thy work. This I pray in Thy holy name.
loves you, Martin. And I love you.
Tis enough. Tis enough. Mine eyes have beheld. Mine eyes have beheld.
That makes me the most emotional, because when I saw that scene, I wanted to shout like, hurrah for Israel. But I remember sitting there just crying, and immediately the thought popped into my head that said, what is your witness? And I have not stopped thinking about that question, like, what is my witness? What will my witness be to my family, my friends, to everything in my life? And I think that's the question that this movie asks all of us. Is when you're at the end, like, what is your witness and what will it be for the rest of your life? I love how you described Oliver Cowdery, like he's all in. And I wonder, have I always been all in? Do I waffle? I just love the way you did this ending scene to evoke that emotion and that question, like, what is my witness? And that is my question for you here. From this experience and being a part of this beautiful work, I want to go around and just share, what is your witness? Russell?
Boy, there are so many things. I realized just probably recently, relatively recently, a new way of thinking about this. I realized that despite all their frailties, despite all the weaknesses, despite the egos, despite the hurt feelings, despite all the faith and all of that, the Lord knew these men so well that despite all of that, they could be trusted to actually, no matter what, tell the truth of their experience and not waffle at the end of a gun, not waffle when you're tarred and feathered, not waffle when you're disappointed, when you're angry at somebody, but they always could be trusted to bear their witness that the Lord asked them to bear. And that, to me, is the message of the witnesses. And for me, my own witness is to ask the rest of the question, can I be trusted to stand true to what I know has happened in my life, and to share it when I need to?
Great witness. Thank you, Russell. Caleb?
I always cry when I see that scene as well. I think anyone with a heart, if they're not moved by that scene, then we need to check their pulse, because it's incredibly moving. And just the idea of seeing an angel, I mean, if that doesn't move you, I don't know what would. Let's see, what's my witness? I'm witness to obviously this is emotional for me as someone who's still on my faith journey. And if I take nothing else away from this, is that there are wonderful, genuine people in a world of really bad people. And you will not find better people than who are sitting on this stage and who've been involved in this project. So I'm witness to that.
That is a beautiful witness, Caleb. Beautiful. Thank you. Lincoln, what's your witness?
Storytelling is something that lets us step into someone else's shoes and experience someone else's life as if it were our own. This is not a movie. I mean, it is a movie about the three witnesses, but it's a movie about your witness And it's a movie that lets you examine that and question that wherever you are and whoever you are. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think in that moment, Martin Harris is not receiving proof that Joseph saw an angel and that there is an angel. What I believe is that Martin is seeing proof that God loves him.
Yeah.
And through that storytelling, my witness to this is that in watching that and in seeing that, I hope that you take away that witness that God loves you as an individual, as a unique person, whoever you are, that's what he does. He is love, and he gives love, and if we can stand it, it's our job to give that love to each other. And that's just a beautiful thing. So love, we're meant to receive it and we're meant to give it.
That witness is truth. I believe that. I believe we're all God's favorite, 100%. What about you, Dan?
Well, one of the things that moved me about this project was how many people came together to make it happen. And there were times when I thought, it's not going to. I can't raise the funding for this. We'd hit a dead end, and I just think it's not going to happen. What am I going to do with the money we've raised? Have to give it back. Embarrassing. Admission of defeat. And then somebody would step up, and I'd think, we are going to make it. It's going to happen. This is supposed to happen. And the fact that I came in contact with skilled filmmakers and so on, that, this is not my world. I'm an Arabist. I teach Arabic grammar and literature and philosophy at a university, so what do I know about this sort of stuff? And there were people out there who thought, critics who said, what does Peterson know about making a movie? This is going to be him with a handheld Super 8 camera. Well, obviously, I didn't think I could make a movie, but other people could, and they came together and made it happen. But to me, this story, and I'm going to get very LDS about this, the fundamental point of the witnesses to me is that if you believe them, then the Book of Mormon is true. Jesus is the Christ. There is a God. He's actively involved. And this is an enormously important message. This is the most important message you can possibly know or convey to the world. And the witnesses seem to me to be really rock solid evidence that those propositions are true. And in a world where a lot of people are, divided and full of hate and allegiance to various ideologies and so on, or in despair, I can't think of a more important message to give them than that. And I hope this film, whether people accept the specific truth claims of the film or not, if they come away from it with a feeling that there is something behind this often disappointing and painful world that we live in, I'm really pleased with that.
Amen. Thank you for that witness. Paul, what's your witness?
I was very blessed in this film because, you think of a film and you think, everybody on the film got to know each other, but, it's shot out of order, it's shot out of context, and for example, Caleb and Martin Harris, Lincoln, they shot maybe one day together, but for me, being Joseph, kind of this middle person, personally, I was able to have very special experiences with Lincoln and learn something about Martin Harris, and Caleb and learn something about Oliver Cowdery and David, and all of these characters. And that scene was incredibly special to film. And the love that Joseph had for Martin Harris. And while I was standing in the back, I was praying, and I thought, when this light comes on, I don't have lines for a minute. What am I supposed to feel? And what emotion would Joseph have felt in that moment for himself and for Martin Harris? And as I'm praying about what I'm supposed to portray, this impression came and it said, you need to forgive him. You have to forgive Martin Harris. And it's time for the people of my church to forgive him because I've forgiven him and Joseph forgave him. And, all my preconceived notions for him went away, and I thought, okay, I do. And I felt genuine love for not only Lincoln, but for Martin Harris, that man, in that moment, and I was so grateful for him. And, when it comes to my witness, Caleb mentioned that we had long conversations, and he would test me, and it was very Oliver Cowdery of him to admonish me as Oliver admonished Joseph. And after literally hours of conversation, we would get up early at 6:30 and go get breakfast and just talk for hours, and he would push questions and this and that, and we would have these open discussions. And we were sitting at lunch, and I don't know if he remembers this conversation, but he kind of, it wasn't an admission of defeat, but he kind of said, it just takes so much faith. You must have so much faith to believe in this. And I said, thank you. And he said, I didn't mean that as a compliment. And I said, that's totally fine, but I'm choosing to take it as one. But I've thought about that. What a ridiculous story that a 14-year-old kid walked into some trees and God appeared and gave him a gold Bible, and an angel came and showed it to 3 other guys. And, Joseph Smith said, if I hadn't witnessed it, I might not believe it myself. But what kind of faith do I have? I've thought a lot about that statement, and I've thought before, would I die for the church? Would I die for the gospel? And really the question is, would you live for it? And, I'm all in. And we've talked about trials, and sometimes I think people look at church history and they say, I can't believe that in spite of all these trials, they had that faith. And I think, maybe that's like going to an athlete and saying, I can't believe in spite of all of the workouts and time you spent working out, you're such a great athlete. Yeah. It's not in spite of the sacrifice, it's because of the sacrifice. Mm-hmm. And, if you're looking for a witness, if you're looking for an answer, if you're looking for meaning, it's going to come with sacrifice. Yeah. And my life has been a testament to when I sacrifice, and like Abraham, I feel like I'm putting everything on the altar. And I say, okay, maybe an angel's not going to come and stop my hand from giving this up. That there has always been a ram in the thicket, so to speak. And I will give my life to that. And I hope that at the end of my life, I can look back and say my life was a witness.
Thank you. Yeah, powerful witness. Okay, Camry, what's your witness?
Oh man, everything that has been said so far is so good and so true. Being a part of this film was incredible, and I wholeheartedly agree with everything that's been said about how important this film is, which I never would have thought of. I think the witnesses get overlooked. Like Dan said, we don't know that much about them, but really getting to know them and beyond them, as I delved into trying to learn as much as I could about Emma and just the early saints of those, of the Restoration, they're these flawed, real people, and there's nothing more inspiring to me than that, really. I will always be a flawed and a real person, and there will always be areas that I'm working on and questions that I'm working to figure out. But despite the questions that we have, I believe that the witnesses saw the plates, and I believe that they believed, and I believe that the strong conviction that they had is available to me and is available to all of us if we make those sacrifices and if we put in the time to gain that testimony.
Thank you so much for that witness. Mark, what's your witness?
The story of the witnesses is fascinating to me. It's remarkable. It's interesting to me that God didn't need the witnesses. It's not like they went out and as they bore witness, thousands gathered to the church. It didn't happen. And yet my life has been changed because of these men. And everyone on this stage, their lives have been changed because of the witnesses and because of the experience that we have been through. The story of the witnesses is about their example and teaching us to be witnesses and how to witness. And my witness is the same as theirs, and that is of the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon and what it witnesses, which is our Savior, Jesus Christ.
Amen. Absolutely. Thank you. And my witness from this is that the gospel of Jesus Christ is joy. It just is joy. And when I watched this, I thought, why would these men continue to witness when their lives would have been so much easier if they had just said, nah, it's not really true. It would have been so much easier. And I think it's because of the joy that they felt in the moment that they experienced in the scene when they did get their witness. Let's go ahead and see that clip of when these men experienced just true joy that I think was the foundation for their witness.
He kindly light amid the encircling gloom. Lead thou me on. The night is dark and I am far from home.
Dear God,
lead thou me on. Keep thou my feet. I do not ask to see
Julia!
the
Julia!
distant scene. One
Julia!
step enough for me.
I have seen them.
Seen what?
I have seen the plates.
I was not ever thus nor prayed that thou shouldst lead me on. I love to choose and see my path, but now lead thou me.
David! David! What happened? It's finished! You're finished?
Yes. The translation is complete.
We must celebrate! Come! We must celebrate! Mother! Mother, the book is done!
Just so much joy, and I love, we must celebrate. So how great is that? Let's celebrate. So we're gonna have the Truman Brothers come back up and we'll join them in song.
This next tune is one of a classic Christian hymn, In the Garden, and with the National Tribute Band, we put our spin on the arrangement, and hope you like it. I come to the garden with him while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear calling on my ear, the Son of God discloses. And he walks with me and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own, and the joy we shared as we tarried there, none other has ever known. He speaks, and the sound of his voice is so sweet, the birds hush their singing, and the melody that he gave to me within my heart is ringing.
And He walks with me, and He talks with me, and He tells me I am His own. And the joy we shared as we tarry there, none other has ever known. I stay in the garden with Him, though the night around me is falling. But He bids me go through the voice of woe. His voice to me is calling. And He walks with me, and He talks with me, and He tells me I am His own. And the joy we shared as we tarry there, none other can ever know. And the joy we shared as we tarry there, none other has ever known.
It's definitely pretty cool pairing that song with some of those scenes, some of those unique, when the light comes on the faces. It was kind of a cool pairing, so it's very cool to be a part of that.
One more for you guys, and we just, again, appreciate it. What a beautiful night. Thank you for being here. Thanks for coming. This last one's an original song of ours, and I think it echoes well the individual stories of all these amazing people that are part of the restoration, and the things they had to go through and the trials they had to overcome to summit that mountain. And this song is called "Give Me This Mountain."
From the bottom of this hill, it's just a dream, but the top could be much closer than it seems. These twists and turns and struggles might make me slip and stumble, but I know that something's waiting there for me. From the first step that I took, I felt your hand guiding me along this narrow path. When I feel like giving up, you give me just enough to keep moving on. There ain't no turning back. I know I could be capable of anything when you stand by me. I know everything's alright, though it's hard to see. I know your love surrounds me even in my darkest day. You give me this mountain. You give me this mountain. From where I'm standing now, I can see the end of a journey I was once scared to begin. The witness after trial comes at the final mile, and I know I'll never be the same again. I know I could be capable of anything when you stand by me, I know everything's alright. Though it's hard to see, I know your love surrounds me even in my darkest day. You give me this mountain. You give me this mountain. You give me this mountain. From the top I can see how far I've come. Oh, every lesson learned and every battle won. Now that I'm standing here, I can see it all so clear. Lord, give me another mountain to overcome. I know I could be capable of anything when you stand by me. I know everything's alright, though it's hard to see. I know your love surrounds me even in my darkest day. You give me this mountain. You give me this mountain. You give me this mountain. You give me this mountain.
Thank you all. Thanks for guys being part of this.
Yeah. Wow. So good, so good. Okay, so thank you for your questions. We have a few that we're going to ask. You guys ready? Yes. Here's some audience questions. First one, this really isn't so much of a question as it is just a congratulations to Paul on your new baby.
Well, thank you.
I know. How old is your new baby?
Just over 2 months. So,
well, congratulations to your wife.
Just over 2 months, yes.
I think we should be congratulating Jenny. Where is she?
Yeah, for sure.
There she is in the
Congratulations,
back.
Jen.
And there's Rudy too.
All right, here is a fun question. The question, Mark and Russ. Well, this could be for you too, also, because it said, why did you consider using the daytime event with retrieving the plates rather than the nighttime events?
So there's a little bit of controversy there. And perhaps a slight misunderstanding. Of course, we all know the story of Joseph going to retrieve the plates with Emma. Emma waits there. It's night, and he leaves her there in the carriage. He goes up, he gets the plates, and then he hides the plates. Moroni has told him that there are going to be those who are going to be trying to get the plates, and Joseph, being concerned for that, hides the plates in a hollow log. He then leaves, and he goes off to work. He goes off, and it's the next day he receives word that there's somebody out after the plates, and so he goes and retrieves those plates. So it actually happened during the daytime.
Yeah. And he'd actually been digging a well and got that word and headed straight there.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, here's the next question. For all of you in the film, you deal with controversial subjects regarding the early church. How do you hope this film will be viewed by church leadership? That's a good question.
Favorably is my hope.
Right?
We all are hoping that we get to keep our membership in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Hopefully.
You know, there was a comment made by a member of the 70 a couple of years ago at a gathering that I was at, and he simply said, look, there's some things the church can't do that other organizations can do. And so we want these organizations to do what they do. This is not the kind of film that would be shown, I think, at a church visitors center. It's, you know, it's going to have too much conflict, too many negative things. But that doesn't mean it doesn't serve a purpose. It's just that the church can't do that. It's got to, you know, teach this affirmative message and so on and so forth. And so it's, you know, I would hope that the leaders of the church would say, good, we couldn't have done this, but we're glad they did. We like having this story told.
Yeah.
It's interesting, as we initially received a lot of criticism that we address so many of these negative subjects. People saying, why did you go there? Why did you feel necessary to do that? And yet our audience almost universally says This is refreshing. We're grateful for this. Thank you. They are impacted by the way we chose to tell the story.
And it's not that painful, right? I mean, it's maybe a little uncomfortable for a few seconds, like, ooh. But then it's like, oh, see, it happened.
Yeah.
We heard it. It wasn't so bad. I learned a little. Yay.
Well, we talked about this, that it's okay to be uncomfortable because then the Holy Ghost can do its job to comfort. So let it do that.
Right.
Yeah, uncomfortable is good. Well, I will say one of my favorite aspects of our religion and beliefs that we have is that we'll be able to see people on the other side of the veil. When we die, we'll see loved ones and people that we knew. And tonight, as you have all talked, I felt like there will be hugs on the other side of the veil between the people that you portrayed and the people that you brought to life. I really do believe that. And you guys did an excellent job. So kudos to all of you. Thank you for putting in the time. It was a wonderful film. Thank you. And thank you to our audience. Thanks for being here. Have a great night.